Well, hello, everyone. Going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to our Purdue Graduate School Tips for a Strong Application. I'm Dr. Colleen Coulter, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to prepare a strong application for graduate school. And just to set up a few ground rules for our conversation. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you have questions, put them in there and I will answer them as soon as I can. And I certainly don't mind stopping along the way if you need to stop me for me to explain something further. We have a lot of students on the Zoom session right now. The plan is for this to be 45 minutes for presentation roughly, and then some Q&A at the end. But again, if we need to stop along the way to chat, I think answering your questions can be the most important part. So I'll stop here and there and ask. So to get started, I just want to mention first off what we're going to be talking about or what we're going to be covering in this particular session. So in here, we're going to cover the application process, the timeline, discuss different types of graduate degrees that you can pursue, go over parts of the application, so creating strong letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, and so on. And talk a little bit about funding as well. But first, I want to start off just by saying there's kind of a tiered application process in graduate school. Graduate school applications are different from undergraduate applications. Undergraduate applications are generally done in what we call a centralized process. And this is some administrative terminology, yes, but it is helpful for you to know the difference so that you understand how your application moves through the channels at an institution when you're applying. So back to undergrads, when an undergraduate applies, it goes to the university or the college, the institution, if you will, for review. And then the institution does the admittance. But for graduate school, you may apply through an application that's through a centralized or what seems to be a centralized service, like Purdue University Graduate School is different. It's its own entity, and it's for all different areas of study, not just engineering. But you're just applying through the application through them and submitting your materials, your general required materials like transcripts and things like that through that application. But then what happens is the departments or the programs where you apply actually review the application. So there's kind of a general admittance when you do undergrad, whereas naturally it makes sense that when you get going into graduate applications, it's much more specialized. So the faculty from the departments or the schools where you're applying then review your application, recommend you for admission, and then the final admittance will then come through the graduate school. But all of the review is done within the school. Now, directions are going to vary. So this is another reason that you want to understand the centralized versus the decentralized process. You'll have directions from the general application from the graduate school that says, here's how many letters to submit. This is, we require a statement of purpose, those kinds of things. But then you have to check the program sites too. So you might look at the graduate school website and the application to see in general what you need to submit to get that completed. But then you also have to always stay in touch with your school or your program to see there might be more specifications, right? Like, for example, about letters. It may say from the graduate school that they require a minimum of 2, but then your program might say, well, no, yes, we require the 2, but beyond that, we want an additional 1. So you will run into some different explanations as well. Like, for example, the graduate school might say a statement of purpose is due with your application, but a school or program will say the content that's expected in there, and that'll help give you some more guidance. So those are just some things to keep in mind about that centralized versus decentralized process. Really helps to show you what some of the additional directions are. In addition to that, like I mentioned before, applications are reviewed by professors in the department. And so they're going to look at what you submitted. And they're going to look at several different things. So like I had mentioned before, your program may have some specific specifications. Like you can see some of the things populating on my screen right now. You can see there might be a publication requirement, or there might be GRE. Not everybody has those, but it could be that your specific program asks for those, or asks for experience, some sort of like research experience or an experience in the field somehow, depending upon your area of study. Oftentimes, and again, it goes through a process, but at Purdue and a number of institutions that are similar to Purdue, their final decision is sent by the Central Graduate Office. So you might receive a recommendation from somebody from a program, and the program says, we've recommended you for admission, and it will be finalized or confirmed by the graduate school, and you'll receive an additional letter at that time. So that's what I mean when I say the final decision is sent by them. I mean, they generally take the recommendation from the departments, but it really depends on, what other documents they may have had to review. They definitely look at transcripts and the whole application package just to make sure it's verified. This is difficult. I think one of the most difficult challenges when applying to graduate school is the review and admit process and how long it can take. You submit all your application and you feel good about it, and it's in and it's done, and you're like, yay, it's over. And then the waiting starts, and there's a lot of angst with that. But I want you to know that that is pretty standard. What happens is once your application is submitted to the department, then you get to sit back but yes, the waiting starts, but now the department has to do its due diligence. So it has to process all your documents, verify them. It has to disseminate them so that then the faculty can review them. And then the faculty need to come together to make final decisions on who they'll recommend for admission. And there's a number of different variables there that they have to consider. And so that is why it takes so long. Your application doesn't sit in an abyss. What happens is it starts moving through these processes. An application is only complete when all the pieces of the application have been received. And that can take a while too. So you might have what you think is a complete application because you finalized it, you paid your fee, everything's submitted, you received confirmation that that electronic application has been confirmed, that it's been received. But then they could be waiting, the department could be waiting on a faculty member's recommendation, something like that, that can hold up the process in terms of review, because there are programs, you know, they have programs set these requirements to keep things standardized. And so if they're waiting on one review for an application or one letter of recommendation, that sits there until that recommendation is in. And so they can't review it generally until all the materials are there. And so that is something that isn't completely in your control, but sending reminders to faculty for the reviews that they're doing for you, for the letters that they're writing, that can help you kind of stay on top of the things that you might be waiting for to get submitted to your program. Another thing that you want to make sure of is that you watch deadlines, that you check minimum requirements, like I mentioned. But watching deadlines is something that varies across schools within just one university, right? So we might have one deadline, one application deadline for aero and astro engineering, but then may have a different one for electrical and computer engineering. So that's another thing that you want to make sure you stay up on in terms of the departments that you're applying to. And that's across all different universities. There may be like a standard range that a lot of your applications will be due between, you know, say December 1st to January 1st. But so there's definitely a window there, but it's different. And so you want to make sure you pay attention to those deadlines. Now, to talk a little bit more about this timeline, you have these, say you're ready to apply and you're applying for fall of 2024, so a year from now. Your timeline starts now. So, and really earlier, if you're able to, you know, have it be earlier, the better. But you need to take your standardized tests if they're required. Now, some of them may not, some programs in engineering will not require standardized tests. So again, that's variable. You will have to write essays. So I would start now and have people read, so that you have time to have people read them, and have all kinds of people read them, have peers read them, but also have faculty, somebody that you know well, take a look at your writing. Request letters of recommendation. So if you haven't asked them yet, and you know there's some people that you want to ask recommendations from, don't hesitate, ask them now. Even if you don't completely have everything that you need in place for applying, go ahead and ask, will you give me a positive recommendation for graduate school? Are you willing to do that? I'm thinking of applying for a master's or a PhD, and I will, you know, if you agree to this, I will send the appropriate material. I know that when I write letters of recommendation, I really appreciate it when students send me, you know, the institution names, the deadlines, the link to where I'm supposed to send it to, and where I can read more about what the application is for. Anything that you can send to your faculty at the beginning of the process is really helpful. Any resume or CV that you have as well, so they can remember the timeline of how long they've known you, where they can see how long you've been working on some of the things you've been doing. And then that's really helpful initially, but then when you send reminders, forward that same email with all that same information. That's not bombardment at all. What it is so helpful because it keeps it all in one place and they can easily reference it. So request letters of recommendation, make that a goal. I'd make that your initial goal if you know where you're applying, or at least in general what you're applying for. Request transcripts. Now that's something that you'll want to do once you definitely know where you're applying to. Requesting transcripts is something that usually you just can do online and request it and then say exactly where you want things sent. Now, when you request the transcripts, sometimes programs will require official transcripts right away, and some will require unofficial initially. And so you may have a copy of an unofficial transcript that you can just upload with your application, which is really helpful. So I would encourage you to get an unofficial transcript too, to be able to do that pretty easily. Now, in November, that's when we generally aim to complete our application. That's when you remind recommenders. That's when, you verify that the completed application is received before the deadline. That could be in November or December. It varies a little bit. But programs start making decisions usually in December. So the earlier you can get your application in, the better off you are. Many programs even begin making decisions or recommendations in January. Anywhere from January to March, you'll receive an answer. It's usually you usually receive your letter somewhere within those months, and then you're required to say whether or not you accept the offer by April 15th. That's a pretty standard deadline in the United States for graduate programs. Okay, so what is the difference between the Purdue University Graduate School, the college graduate office, and individual school graduate offices? So this quagmire can be a little bit much to navigate at first, but you will get a handle on it. It takes a little while, but you'll start to understand who the people are that you can go to ask questions about certain topics. So Purdue University Graduate School, they manage the online application system and officially grant admission, like I mentioned before. The college graduate office is a liaison. So they're there to help you connect with faculty directly. So they'll say you're applying for civil engineering and you're in touch with the civil engineering graduate office. They'll have a contact there for you that can answer your questions about your application status, about who to contact, about maybe you're having trouble getting in touch with a faculty member. They're your go-to person. So you want to know who your go-to people are, right? Now, the college graduate office in the College of Engineering is kind of an intermediary. So, sorry, at first I was talking about the individual school graduate offices. So in the individual school graduate offices, they're the ones who can then tell you about your application. But the college graduate office, which I mean the College of Engineering in this particular case, they kind of serve as this intermediary. So they're there to help make sure that okay, here's the difference between these two different entities that you're applying to. Here's how I can help you get connected with your individual school graduate office if you're not sure who your contact is. And here's how, to apply to graduate school. And we're there for a number of resources. We help students transition into their graduate studies, talk to students a lot about how to determine, which programs to pick, those kinds of things. Then we do a lot of student success related work. So when in doubt, you can always reach out to me. is one of the things that I'm saying. I am from the College of Engineering, and I work with the individual school graduate offices all the time. Now, it's important as we look at graduate school that we understand the difference between common graduate degrees. Now, some of you may be well versed in this. You know, we're kind of all at different stages of the process, I think, at this point, even if we're all applying for fall 2024, which I'm sure not everyone is, but even if we all were, we'd still be at different levels of understanding about what these graduate degrees are. It can, when you're outside of it, it can seem like kind of an enigma. But the common graduate degrees that you'll often hear are master's versus PhD, master's, an MS or a Master of Science, MA, Master of Arts. And then PhD, you might hear about a direct PhD, a direct admit PhD, a master's first or a master's along the way PhD, meaning they get the master's degree issued on their route to the PhD. But the fundamental difference is the time and some of the things that you do in the process, obviously. But the master's is 30 credits. So if we're going to kind of talk in undergrad types of terms or undergrad types of language, the master's is 30 credits. The PhD is 90. The PhD, if you decide after you enter master's that you want to get the PhD and you want to apply for that, usually programs, as long as it's applicable, will accept 30 credits from the master's. A lot of master's degrees are on average around 30 credits. Some might be a bit more, but it really depends on the specialty area. Now, master's degrees can be thesis or non-thesis. Thesis means that in addition to your courses, you'll do research and you'll write it up in the form of a master's thesis. Now, non-thesis means you'll take courses. So you won't do that research component, or you won't do that research and write up component. Master's degrees they take around 1 to 2 years if you're full-time. And careers, master's degrees are generally helpful in careers that require some sort of specialization. Some management positions might require them, and some research. Sometimes students will do independent studies during their master's, even if it's non-thesis, just to try to understand, how research is applied in their area. You can see it starts to get murky in terms of there's not just one exact pathway in terms of graduate education. And I think that's where it can get a little difficult to understand at first, or to select exactly what you want to do. But over time, you start to get to know the programs, the faculty, and the students, and it helps you really navigate your path. So the PhD, again, I said you might go directly into a PhD or you might do a master's first. But fundamentally, the difference is the dissertation. So the research and the write-up is pretty extensive with a PhD, and you spend quite a bit of your time proposing the research that you're going to do, trying to do it, working through some of the processes, and then kind of continuing through that until you become a producer of knowledge. That's generally what you're doing when you're doing a PhD, is you're producing knowledge, you're becoming an expert in this particular area of study. So it requires a 3 to 5 year commitment beyond the master's, and often includes careers in research and development, leadership, academic positions, and so on and so forth. So the parts of the application. So there's a number of different parts of the application. We have the online application form and the fee, which again varies. We have a statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, standardized test scores, not always required, TOEFL or IELTS for international living outside of the U.S. or having graduated from institutions outside of the U.S. within the last couple of years. Grade point average, which is GPA, transcripts, previous work experience, research experience, activities, and a resume or a CV. Now, believe it or not, this comes together. You get your checklist going for each institution where you're applying, you get your deadlines written down, start writing, ask for your letters of recommendation. And this stuff starts to come together, but you got to take it piece by piece. There are sometimes graduate application fee waivers that exist. Like, for example, Purdue offers what we call the Purdue Graduate Showcase. And I know some of you are signed up for that. I can tell by some of the names that I recognize on here. But if you aren't signed up for that, you're welcome to. It's called and I'll mention it again at the end, it's the Purdue Virtual Graduate Engineering Showcase. And it's on October 1st and 2nd. If you're registered for that, you participate, and then you have to do is answer a series of questions about the event platform and how your event went. Nothing difficult, extremely difficult or anything. But once you process your fee waiver, then you make it so you don't have to pay for the application fee. So that is something that can be really helpful, and institutions offer some various opportunities for that. Sometimes when students have done summer research, then they're put in a pool that does not have to pay an application fee. So it really depends on what your opportunities are with your particular programs, but sometimes that can be waived. Not always, but it's nice when there's opportunities that offer you a chance to not have to pay that fee. So now I'm going to talk in particular about some of these possible requirements that you'll come across. So standardized tests, I've mentioned them a few times, that they're not always required, but you still want to be aware of them, and you want to be aware of the language that some of these contacts that you get in touch with might, some of the language that they might use. Like they might say, oh, we require a GRE general test, or we require a GRE subject test. So a GRE general test is just exactly that. It's general. But then there's subject tests that, they may say, oh, we require like say you're applying to biomedical engineering, and biomedical engineering at some schools, not here, but in some places might require the biochemistry, cell and molecular biology subject tests. So those subject tests exist, and that's just what I'm letting you know. But I am seeing some of those applications, or some of those requirements for standardized tests fall away, and there aren't. And so just make sure you stay up on that. The GMAT is for an MBA. You may hear that mentioned in some programs that are dual engineering and masters in business. And then English proficiency, which I mentioned already. TOEFL, I think, is really well known. IELTS in some parts of the world is very well known. But those are the two tests that are accepted at Purdue for English proficiency. Now, before I keep moving forward, I am going to answer a couple of questions that I've gotten in the chat. So I see that I have a question about, are there any events for spring application for application fee waivers? So yes, and that's the Purdue virtual showcase. So you can apply for the Purdue virtual showcase, which Again, I'll mention at the end, and I'm going to put this in the chat as well so that you can see it. And then you can also Google it, but it's the Purdue Engineering Virtual Graduate Showcase. I will also send a link when I follow up to this webinar for you. I will send that along, but that's where you can get a fee waiver as long as you participate and submit the proper materials. So someone else asked, do you recommend doing a master's before a PhD? Now, I don't have a specific recommendation about this because it really depends on your area of study. I did a master's before I earned my doctorate, and it was helpful in my particular area of study, but it could be that getting a PhD right away is something that, or going into a PhD program and getting a master's along the way could be something that the department where you're applying just does, and it's inherent in the process. And so that's a great question to ask when you're working on applying and when you first reach out to the department. And they will let you know. I mean, sometimes they'll say, well, no matter what, we accept into the master's first. Or some may say apply for the PhD because we only give, if you want funding, we only give funding to PhD students. Really, it is so specific to the area of study. Another question here. Do you have any application tips within essays and stats for a senior in college applying for a direct PhD? Especially for a field not exactly in what they majored in college. So essays for a senior in college applying for a direct PhD, and they didn't study in the particular field where they're applying. Well, one of the first recommendations that I have for you there is that you want to talk to the department and do your research first, though. Make sure you do your due diligence in reading what information is available on the website. Take a look and see what minimum requirements they have. Like they may say, we require 18, at least 18 credits in this specific major before we'll consider your application for graduate school. So you want to check on that. Then some may say, hey, we're very interdisciplinary, because so many areas of so many areas of engineering are so interdisciplinary that they may say, oh, well, you are a physics and math major, so yes, you can apply based on the courses I see that you've taken. You can apply for this program and we'll consider you now. So again, ask for minimum requirements in terms of curriculum or coursework for undergraduates to then be able to apply. Now, I see another question here. How do deadlines change for online master's options? So it really is just like master's, PhD, any programs and any of their specializations could have different deadlines. So again, that's a matter of you taking a look online to see what is required for that particular area. So remember that I mentioned, okay, there's this graduate school application that's kind of general, but then you also have to check with the area that you're applying to see what they say about your specific deadline. Another question here in the chat is, as a final year student, can I apply for grad school when my final year results are not available yet? Yes, absolutely. And we're used to that. We have students that are in their final year or their senior year of an undergraduate study, and they apply, and we only have their transcripts from, say, their first semester or their first couple of quarters. And a decision will still be made based on that. in terms of admittance, but we'll be able to see the courses you're taking. And so it could be that your acceptance is contingent upon you completing those courses successfully that you haven't submitted the transcript for. And then most people will have to submit another transcript once they get to the institution so that you can update your file on everything that you completed. So yeah, that's totally normal that you may not have completed all of your coursework yet. How possible is it for a physics major to enter into a master's of engineering? What if I don't have all of the necessary prerequisite courses? So in terms of being a physics major, there are a number of areas of engineering that you can absolutely apply to. As far as prerequisite courses, I can't speak to that generally. That would need to be something that you look at for your specific area of study to make sure that the prerequisite courses are achieved. Now, you will see a lot of commonalities though. So if you're looking at programs, which I encourage you to do across different institutions, there will be some definite agreement on some of the prereqs that students take. But there may be some nuances that you need to pay attention to. And if you're not clear, just reach out and ask. So there should be an email address or someone or a particular person to contact. Write to them and ask. If the GRE is not required for the department you are looking to apply to, does it affect your chance for admission if you don't submit one? If it's not required, then there's no reason for you to have to submit one. So if it's not, sometimes if it's not required and you submit one, they may never look at it. So, if it's not required, then they mean it's not required. Okay, so before I get to any others, I'm gonna move forward here, and I will get back to the chat momentarily. Okay, so let's go to GPA, transcripts, and diploma. What a transcript is it's an official list of classes and scores. This is something that you get from your institution where you attended and took classes. So it could be where you completed your degree, but it could be somewhere where you took classes, but it's not the institution that conferred your degree. This could be a copy of a diploma. It could be the name on the transcript has to match the name, spelling in order on your application. And then the GPA or grade point average in the United States is usually done on a 4.0 scale. This means that would be all A's, 3.0 would be B's. But we do recognize that not everybody's on a 4.0 scale. Purdue is definitely an internationally renowned university. We see all kinds of transcripts and are well-versed in reviewing them. And so you will see a lot of things that say, oh, what's your GPA? What's your GPA? We know that some are on a 5-point scale. I just want to encourage you to understand that we do know they vary by institution. Letters of recommendation, to give a little more detail, is a letter from a professor recommending you to a graduate program. It may include a form and a letter that they have to fill out and complete. This should be somebody that knows you, that has seen your work and seen your progress as a student and can speak to that. These are highly valued by admissions committee members. I have always been surprised on the admissions committees that I've been on by how many professors in a room may know some of the recommenders. it's a small world when you start to get into graduate specializations. And so these letters really are important. Typically, programs will ask for 3, and you might say, oh, I want to have some professors recommend to me, but there's also somebody I worked with closely that's an administrator at an institution where I did some leadership training and so on and so forth. Absolutely. You can have, I would say, only one of those, but if somebody can speak to good qualities about you that would serve well in a graduate program, leadership, of course, or an association you're a part of, so on and so forth, then you can definitely have one of those. But you have to have letters from professors that dominate whatever letters you're submitting. Get to know your current professors. If there's somebody who is teaching the class that you're in, that you really like their style, or you really like what they're teaching and how they're doing it, or the subject matter that you've been learning, get to know them. Ask to meet with them. Meet with them during office hours. Tell them you're interested in graduate school. Ask them, ways they might be able to help you prepare. Select professors who can talk about different strengths that you have. Give them plenty of notice. That's why I say get going on your timeline now. If that's, if there's something if you don't know where to start there. Make their job easy. Give them lots of information in the email about you so that they can then refer to it easily. Follow up. And don't feel like that's an annoying thing in any way. Follow up, check in, find out if they have any questions, or if, there's any more information that they need, and just give reminders. And that's a good thing. I welcome the reminders. I always have appreciated that. When you're asking for a letter of recommendation, there's a few different ways to do it. You might ask to meet in person. You might talk to them by phone or video call, have a quick Zoom with them or something like that. Make an appointment and then make sure you go. And when you ask, would you be willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation? I always like it when students say, would you be willing to write me a strong or a positive recommendation? Just be specific about that, because that's what you want. You want a positive or a strong recommendation, and they will likely be honest with you and say, if they don't think they can, they might say, I don't feel I know you well enough to write a recommendation. And then that even starts a conversation too. Well, how can I get to know you? Or who do you recommend I ask? Things like that. So just ask for a strong one or a positive one. Give them all the universities and deadlines they need, again, and follow up. Okay, now for statement of purpose. So statement of purpose is all about, it's an essay that's about, why you want to go to graduate school. And some applications may also ask for a personal statement. You may even see this more this year, that there's a couple of different essays you need to write. Usually one is exactly about why you want to go to graduate school, and another is about your narrative, it's more of a story. It's about what you could contribute to the program. And there's usually prompts for the different types. They're usually pretty short. So what I say is write and write and write and write, and then cut. So write as much as you can, let yourself get away from just having that blank page, and then cut things out based on the prompts that they've given you. Now, this demonstrates your ability to communicate. The statement of purpose is really important in that sense. And one of the things that you want to make sure you use is simple, direct language. You don't need to be flowery. Just get your point across and make it easily understood and organized. Remember that when reviewers are reviewing, they are seeing hundreds, if not thousands of these. So make it easy on them. And that is one of the things, like, it's hard to, put yourself in their shoes when you're thinking, you want to get accepted to this program, but think about it from their side, make it easy for them. Say thank you at the end. Those kinds of things can really help lift somebody out of, reading hundreds and hundreds of these. Explain a number of different things, but the main thing is, why should they choose you? Why should Purdue choose you for this particular engineering program? And why are you choosing Purdue? Be personalized in the way in which you mention an institution. So I've got 3 main questions here to put up for you. I'll pop them all up right now. This is one of the key things that I'll give you to walk away with from this particular webinar. When you're putting together your applications, think about these questions. What have you done and what did you learn from it? What are your future plans for this degree? Like, what are your career goals? Why do you think you need this degree to get along the way to achieve your career goals? And why are you selecting this program or institution to meet your goals? Those are some really essential things to know as you move forward with your with your pursuit of graduate school. And so it is introspective. You've got some reflecting to do on the inside about, what you're really wanting to do and planning to do. But sit down and answer these questions. What have I done and what did I learn from it? This could be courses. This could be summer research. It could be an independent study or a senior capstone. This could be just somebody you shadowed. You can shadow faculty or industry reps, or it could be somebody that you just know and they've talked about their career and you've thought, wow, I'd really like to do that. So think about these things as you move forward.